Hi folks, happy Friday, welcome once more to the weekend. I trust you've had a great week and spent at least some of it with your head in a book in a format of your choice. Talking of which, what have I been reading this week? I finished The Dispossessed by Ursula Le Guin, and this is a tale of two worlds, Anares and Urus, each the moon of the other. One, Anares is home to the descendants of political refugees, adherents of Odo, a philosopher and theorist writing a couple of hundred years previously. The system of government is that there is no government, or at least not one that we'd recognise. It's a textbook communist system, anarcho-syndicalist in fact, but without the authoritarian overtones that we might associate with that kind of government here. It's a rather austere existence, but a fair one. Anares is a harsh environment. It's mostly desert, resources are few, arable land is sparse, and Anarans have few possessions. They are literally dispossessed. Jobs are shared out according to ability, and our protagonist, Shevek, is an academic, flirting with non-orthodox ideas in physics, generating jealousy, and who spends some of his time on more menial tasks, days at a time, as part of the sharing of the responsibilities that's expected of him as a citizen. The book is structured with alternate locations and converging timelines. The first is set on the communist Anares, where we learn about Shevek and his research, his relationships, and also about how society on Anares, how things work there. This plot line jumps around a little bit, and we see some of Shevek's earlier life, then events spiral towards his eventual departure for the more decadent capitalist Urus, which is where the other plot thread happens. The relationship between Anares and Urus is interesting. Anares considers itself free, the pure result of revolution many years in the past, but their dependence on Urus for critical resources means that Urus considers them to be merely a wayward mining colony. It is not a partnership of equals. And in the background of all of this, we have the presence of the Hainish and Terran representatives, the Tau Ceti colonies having been rediscovered some 60 years ago. Le Guin uses the book to compare two political systems, each with their benefits and flaws, but doesn't come down too firmly on one side or the other. There are hidden motivations on both sides, manoeuvrings, as it were, agendas, which put neither party in a particularly good light. Shevek is a good main character. He's an honourable sort of chap, and he's just trying to get some serious physics done. His invention, the Ansible, does eventually get the outlet that it needs, and it's critical to the whole of the Hainish universe. The Dispossessed, although it wasn't the first written, is, chronologically speaking, the first book of the Hainish cycle. This was my first non-Earthsea Le Guin, and I enjoyed it very much. It's not a book that you can sail through. It does require some focus and attention, but not so much that it becomes a chore to read. I got on pretty well with her prose style. She does a great job with conjuring not one but two worlds into existence. It's big of me to say this, I know. It's not as if she needs my endorsement or anything, but I really liked it, and I will definitely be back for more Le Guin, specifically more of the Hainish universe. Next, on audiobook this time, I read Chocky by John Wyndham, and this was a quick read. I more or less finished it during a 2-hour run last weekend. I'm on a bit of a John Wyndham streak at the moment, and I'm enjoying exploring his novels. Some are new to me and some familiar rereads. This is the first time that I've read Chocky, and although I dimly remember a children's TV dramatisation of it from my childhood. Chocky is a tale of imaginary friends, or of demonic possession, or of first contact. It rather depends on your perspective. We follow a young family, the Gores. Matthew, aged 12, has an imaginary friend that he calls Chocky. His father, David, is concerned. The family have some experience with imaginary friends. David's sister had an imaginary friend which she grew out of much younger. Matthew is quite a bit older than she, and Chocky is a different quality of imaginary friend. Matthew becomes withdrawn, asking searching questions which the adults in his life, his parents, his teachers, find difficult to answer. Why do cows stop? Why do humans have two genders? Why don't we use binary numbers? And where is the Earth? Increasingly worried for him, his parents try to engage psychologists to tell them what's going on. In the meantime, Matthew and Chocky get into all manner of bother. Matthew attracts national press attention for actions which were Chocky assisted, let's say, a brave rescue of his sister and a prize-winning piece of art. Matthew's parents gradually come to believe that Chocky might be more than imaginary, as do shady authorities, resulting in a kidnap of Matthew. Chocky is a short, sharp story. In fact, it started life as a short story, and typical of John Wyndham's work, it's rather understated in a British stiff upper lip sort of way. I do enjoy his writing, and Chocky was no exception. A little bit like the Chrysalids, it has a young protagonist, and Chocky has, as a result, YA overtones, but Wyndham ratchets up the tension as the story proceeds, and with an adult narrator, it never really feels like a children's story. For me, Chocky isn't top-tier Wyndham, but it is pretty good, and it's a satisfying, quick read. Next, I read Beneath the World, a Sea by Beckett, who was the author of the Eden trilogy that I very much enjoyed earlier this year. This book follows a British policeman, Ben, sent by the United Nations to investigate and stop the killings of the Duende, a sort of humanoid inhabitant of the submundo delta, which seems to be in or at least near Brazil. Beneath the World at Sea has a dreamlike quality to it. I felt like the whole thing was shimmery or fuzzy, that feeling you have when you're halfway between sleep and wakefulness. Surreal, even. The submundo delta is a strange place in every respect. The biology is different. Some think extraterrestrial, some merely that evolution has taken a different course here. The delta is more sea than land. The forest floor is made up of roots of strange trees that extend below into the waterline. There is one rocky area, effectively an island in this delta, where the only town of any size exists. The town is also strange. It's a mix of colonial era architecture, kind of crumbling, and an odd set of inhabitants, many of them expats. The delta is rendered even stranger by the surrounding zone of oblivion which surrounds it. The zone can be traversed, but no memory of the time spent there will be retained. Beckett increases the level of isolation by setting the book in 1990, before pervasive communications, before mobile phones or the internet or satellite communications. The delta can only be reached by river, a long and meandering journey through the zone. The Duende, the humanoids of the piece, are also very odd. They're strange and silent creatures, long-limbed and button-eyed, and they mostly keep themselves to themselves, but they have an unwelcome psychic effect on the humans that also live in the delta. Through some kind of telepathy or extreme empathy, they dredge up from nearby humans' subconscious any thoughts of self-doubt or self-loathing, amplifying them, and this is distressing, and the humans generally dislike the Duende and see them as vermin to be exterminated, hence the killings and the rituals that surround them. In its wisdom, the United Nations has declared that the Duende are sentient and thus worthy of protection. Having read the Eden trilogy, I was already impressed with Beckett's world building, and he didn't disappoint in that department with Beneath the World at Sea. From a plot point of view, arguably not a lot really happens. It's more of a character study, with the delta upstaging the human protagonist, the British copper, as a character. The strangeness of the delta and its effects on the people there, particularly the visiting Westerners, the mysteries of the zone, were all more than enough to keep me interested. The submundo, the underworld, induces a kind of subdued lethargy in its visitors, and despite a lack of clear plot thread, I did not succumb to this lethargy. I enjoyed my time in the delta. Returning to my Wyndham streak, I read Trouble with Lichen next, another first-time read for me, again on audiobook. Lichen is noteworthy for having a pretty strong female lead characters, unusual for the time and also unusual for Wyndham too. In Trouble with Lichen, Wyndham imagines what might be the effect of introducing an effective anti-aging treatment. Who should get it? How should a limited supply be rationed and distributed? What might be the effects on society of such a treatment, and what vested interests might oppose it? And how might they go about doing that? I really like Diana, the female scientist, the joint discoverer of the lichen with the anti-aging properties, and I like the slow burn relationship she has with Francis Saxover, the owner of the research institute where she makes the discovery. Diana goes on to open a beauty clinic, which seems like a very cynical way to exploit the discovery, but she has ulterior motives. Her eye is on the long game. Once again, Wyndham ratchets up the tension as the book progresses, with things getting violent and uncontrolled towards the end. Wyndham can do no wrong for me now. I've enjoyed everything of his that I've read, some more than others, but there are no duds. Of Wyndham's novels published post-World War II, I think I have just one left to tackle, The Outward Urge, which I gather is a fix-up. I hear it's rather weak in comparison, but does boast my favourite cover. Once I'm done with that, I plan to take a closer look at all of them in a video. From the sublime to the boring, next I read The Hammer of God by Arthur C. Clarke. Sadly, the best thing about this novel is the title, which sounds exciting, kinetic and dangerous. And sadly, there is very little of that in the book itself, which is a short story that Clarke expanded, I think, unnecessarily into a novel. The padding, I'm afraid, is very visible. Over half of The Hammer of God is biography of one or two of the lead characters, and Clarke is too busy showing off his vision of a 23rd century solar system. The moon and Mars are frequently visited and have a permanent presence, and are busy being bent to humanity's needs. Where was I? Yes, Clarke. Too busy showing off to give us an actual plot. When we finally get to what should be the exciting bit, it's a damp squib. I didn't get any sense of jeopardy. There's no devastation. There's no thrilling battle with the hammer. Fundamentally, I just didn't care. Many people warned me last week that it was a dull read, but there was at least one person who thought it has merit. Sadly, I'm with the majority. I found it boring. If you want a proper disaster tale involving a massive comet strike, a different, more devilish hammer is what you want. Nivell and Pournelle's Lucifer's Hammer is a much better bet. On the plus side, Hammer of God was the last book on my planned TBR pile for August. I've already jammed several extra books in so far via audiobook, and with a whole week of August left, I can now probably add at least a couple more. With that in mind, I'm about 25% into The Mercy of Gods, which is the new book from the authors of the very successful Expanse series. So far, so good. I'm enjoying it. I've also picked up once more Surface Detail on audiobook. I had to park it for a couple of weeks as my free hours on Spotify ran out. I haven't listened to much of that this week, but I am making progress. Once again, for me, that was a pretty good reading week. I'm having an excellent month all round. What about you? What have you been reading? Do let me know in the comments, especially if you have recommendations to make. I'd love to hear from you. Channel stuff next then. Subscribers are at 3,099, up 40 on last week, which is a pretty good week for me. If you're one of those 40, or if you've stumbled across my channel for the first time today, my warmest welcome to you all. I'm John, and I focus on reading, collecting and chatting about science fiction books, old and new. Comment of the week this week was from Steve, Outlaw Bookseller, in response to last week's update, which included a mini review of Ascent by Jed Mercurio, which is based around the Soviet space program in the 1960s. After he got a cheeky plug for one of his videos out of the way, Steve went on to recommend a couple of books about the Soviet space program that might also be of interest to me. And as a bonus extra, Kevin also left a comment along the same lines, recommending a couple of different books that cover similar ground. Thank you to both Steve and to Kevin for taking the time to leave a comment, and to all of you that do the same. It's one of the joys of running this channel, and I really appreciate it. In other news, I got a postcard from a viewer yesterday. This is from Bruce from Toronto in Canada. I've had a few different pictorial missives from him over the last few months, and it's always lovely to hear from a viewer, and even better in old school postal format. Thank you to Bruce, much appreciated. Let's take a quick look at what was on the channel last week. This is pretty straightforward, as there was just the one video on Sunday, a look at some science fiction highlights from the 1960s. That video seemed to go down very well. It's shaping up to be an all-time top 5 video for my channel, so I'm pretty happy with that. If you haven't watched it yet, I humbly commend it to you. Either you'll discover some great books that you weren't aware of, or there'll be old friends that you might revisit, or maybe a bit of both. I had half planned to squeeze another video in, an update of my short story reading challenge life story, but the fact is I haven't actually read any of them yet. I'm not too worried about it. I didn't particularly set a timer on that challenge, and I will get to them eventually. On the book buying front, I've acquired a few since last week. I've added one book to my Pan Lozenge collection, and a few books arrived from a random trawl of the World of Books website. That can often be a bit of a lottery condition-wise, but these were all in as described conditions, so I was pretty happy with those. I was also very happy to come home from work yesterday to find an unexpected book had arrived, plucked off my Amazon wishlist by Andre in Romania. I shall say more on that in the next haul video, but in the meantime, Andre, thank you very much, much appreciated, and yes, it did make me smile for the rest of the day. If the prospect of me smiling is important to you, there's a bunch of other books on my Amazon wishlist, the link for which is in the description to this video. The running total of books on my to-be-hauled pile is now 11, with another due to arrive imminently today. On BookTube this week, I've watched a couple of things. I watched in horror as Rachel of the Shades of Orange laid out her case that there is such a thing as too many books, apparently, listing some symptoms that might indicate that you are suffering from this alleged syndrome. My head accepts the logic, kind of, but clearly my heart is like, what are you talking about, lady? I'll just get some more shelves. I watched Richard at Vintage SF give an overview of the last of the Ace Specials Series 2, which happens to be a book that I've acquired recently myself. It's Chelsea Quinn Yarborough's Time of the Fourth Horseman. Richard wasn't a huge fan, so perhaps I won't prioritise reading that one. I doubled down and watched another of Richard's videos. He's churning them out pretty fast at the moment. This one was about Blood Music by Greg Bear, as a book I'd really like to get my mitts on. I'm holding out for a nice first edition hardback, ideally the Golanks, but they're pretty hard to come by without spending a bunch of cash. As usual, I shall put the links to those videos in the description in case you want to have a gander yourself. Normally at this point I would tell you what was coming up on the channel this week, but things there are a little bit uncertain. It's a holiday weekend here in the UK, but I'm busy all day on both Saturday and Monday for various reasons, so there's little time available for this video business. I have one video partly scripted, but I'm nowhere near ready to record it. It's about the concept of zones in science fiction, zones where weird things happen, where things are abnormal. I'm hoping that that will arrive during the week. The earliest will be Sunday, but more likely I think midweek, but we'll see. The calendar also dictates that there should be a look at my reading plans for September, wheeling out the Bingo Balls of Fate once more, along with the Decision Dice of Destiny. We'll have to see if I actually get to that or not, I'm not sure. I guess I'm saying there might be anywhere between 0 and 2 videos this coming week. Longer range, I have 2 other themed videos in mind. One a look at the generation ship in science fiction, and another look at space opera, this time from the noughties. So far, for both videos, I've just identified the books that I want to cover, and that's it. Reading-wise, I shall finish Surface Detail tomorrow whilst I'm out on the trails. I have less than 3 hours of that left to listen to, and plenty of time to listen to it. I've got a 50-kilometre training run to do. I shall be a captive audience for audiobooks. And whilst I'm there, I shall also make a start on Lake of Darkness by Adam Roberts, which is included in my Audible subscription. I'm really looking forward to Lake of Darkness. I like his work in general. I hear really good things about this one. It's even been described as the best science fiction book of 2024. We shall see. In actual book form, I shall make, I think, quick work of The Mercy of Gods, and then I'll see what takes my fancy as August comes to a close. And those pesky short stories might also get a look in. As always, thank you for watching. Have a super weekend, and until next time, goodbye for now.